Hi everyone, my name is Ali and I perform under the artist name King Hao. I make a lot of electronic experimental folk music and I use Ableton Live in every single one of my live performances. I'm making this video for my production students, but also for anyone else who may be curious how I do my live set or who may need some guidance on how to get into this if they're brand new to it. So for the purpose of today, my live set is pretty much done and I don't have any new songs that I'm wanting to add at this point in time. So I'm going to be using an example from Honan, a really cool musical group, because Honan has asked me to run live playback for her this weekend. So I'm going to be putting her songs into a live set. Some things we're going to cover is file organizing and file management and ways that you can make this super easy for yourself so that you don't get things mixed up, how to group your tracks to just kind of simplify things a bit. Also, we're going to be using Ableton's arrangement view because I'm a jazz musician and this gives me more freedom to improvise through loop sections and all of that. So this will be the basics. To start, let's look at file management. Also, excuse my 3 curses and also excuse the vectors. They are completely unrelated. That's for another project. I just didn't want to turn them off in case I forgot how to turn them back on. So ignore them. They can happen every time I gesture with my hands. But so looking down in this corner, the very first thing you need to do is make a brand new folder titled band name live set. I've labeled it in all capitals so it's really obvious and given it a big 0 so it's always at the top. Within that, you're going to make another folder titled band name main setlist or set lists, because as you evolve your set list over the years, it's a really good habit to collect all and save as before you do any drastic changes. If you're introducing a crazy new method of MIDI mapping, do this first in case it interferes with other parameters that you've set up. Then you always have past set lists that you can go back to. I've never had to go back to one of my past ones, but it's just a good habit to get into. Then, for however many songs you're wanting to add to your set list, make new folders underneath. In this case, there's 2 Honan songs that I'm doing. In my own live set list, I have maybe close on 20 folders all listed, 1 through 20. And that is every single song that is in my live set. So like all of my King Hao originals and a few covers. They all get a brand new folder that has live in capitals at the end. You know, most of you are producers, and this means that your production session in Ableton is completely separate from the live performance session. So make those folders. Then within that folder, you're going to save a brand new copy of whichever song you want to add. And again, I've added live at the end so that it's massive and really obvious. When we open up this is Honan's live session. You can see that I've started grouping some things together, like the backing vocals, the bass, super straightforward. When you group your tracks, I want you to think of the 5 to 10 overall categories that all of your instrumentation and arrangements can be grouped into. For example, in King Hao, I have a lot of strings. Violin is my primary instrument. There's layer upon layer of violin in every one of my songs. There's pizzicato violin, there's arco, there's like more ambient sounds, there's pads, all of that. 3 of my 10 groups are just violin. If you don't have violin in your music, you don't have a violin category. If you have a violin solo on one of your songs and nothing else, maybe you have a features category. And we're not just talking the one specific song, we're talking all of your songs. Every song that you want in your live set list. Does it tend to be your set very guitar heavy? Does it tend to be very drum heavy? If so, is that largely MIDI drums that you've programmed, or is it a lot of acoustic drums, or is it both? Do you want these to be grouped together or separated into 2 categories? It's up to you. I also really like to separate my bass and my subs. That's a personal preference thing. I recommend writing this down in your notes app or something, just thinking about if it can apply to most of your songs. We're trying to make a template here. Okay, after that's done, I want you to manually start grouping those tracks together. And once you've done it, minimize it. We have 2 backing vocals labeled. I already did this and grouped. Minimize. Keys, not in a group yet. For the sake of just getting some habits in, I'm going to add it to a group even though it's the only one. Rename it 02 keys. I really like to use capitals for my group tracks and then lowercase for my individual tracks, just so it gives me an extra layer of proofreading when I bounce my stems. So done, minimize. Strings, only 1 audio file there, but it's in a group. Bass, excellent. Drums, already did it. The reason we're doing this is so that when you perform live, let's say you perform a solo gig, you would have all of these unmuted. You'd have all of them coming out the front of house. But let's say one gig, you have a drummer. Maybe your friend's in town that plays drums and you're like, hey, jump on my gig. You can mute this track in your overall main set list, and it will mute the drums across your whole set list. And the same can be said for bass or strings or keys, whatever. So that's why we're doing these groups. If, for example, with drums, in some of my King Hao music, I have MIDI drums and I have acoustic drums, and I've separated them out into 2 different groups. Sometimes even when I have my drummer playing, I may still want to hear some of the programmed MIDI drums that I've created, especially if those MIDI drums are playing more auxiliary percussion stuff. If you have them grouped, you can only toggle the whole thing on or off, nothing in between. If you say sing vocals in your band and you have a vocal track, which is your main vocal line, have that separate from your backing vocals and just turn off your main vocals. And maybe color code it red so that you don't accidentally bounce it. Once you have your groups here, again, 5 to 10, maximum of 10, highlight all of them, file, export, selected tracks only, make sure that your render length, your start and end is where it's meant to be, and export. And now we're going to make a whole new folder. You get a look at my files here, and I've already got a stems folder, ignore that. We're going to call this Be There Live Stems. Create that, save. After you've exported your stems, make a note of the tempo and the time signature. Those are important. This is 138 and it's in 4/4. Then open an entirely new live set. Deleting the MIDI for now. I'm making 5 audio tracks because I have 5 stems. Drag and drop them in here. Reminder, if you press and hold Command on, Command off, they drop where they're meant to be. That's a horrid color. Make sure that warp is turned off and adjust your tempo. We're going to circle back to the tempo in a second. This is going to be your main set list where all of your songs will end up. So save this as such in your main set lists folder. Honan main set 1.0. Got to change this color. You can make them all different if you like. In my own set list, each instrument is a different color, but I'm not going to do that today for the sake of time. So now highlight all of these, add them to a group, and call out something like live tracks. The reason we do this, if you're performing and your tracks are just way too hot and the mixing engineer is like, whoa, way too loud, and you've already adjusted outputs and it's weird and not working, you can just adjust the overall gain of your tracks here with one button rather than manually going through, being like backing vocals, keys, strings, and changing them all. In regards to naming here, this strip, this lovely little strip along here is going to be used for our whole set list. So please name it accordingly. 01 BVs, 02 is keys. Every key stem is going to go on this line. Strings, bass, drums. Okay, our click track. I'm going to minimize these for now. Create a new MIDI track, drag it to the top, click. So regarding sounds, make it whatever you want. It can be hard to find something that's not too heinous, that can still be heard over everything else in your ears. Toggle through some different sounds that you may like. That'll do. Insert a MIDI track and draw in some quarter notes. Okay, and duplicate this for the length of your song. It's not pleasant, but it will do. For every song, you want to add a 2-bar count in, just for consistency's sake. Drag these back 2 bars. So now we hear 2, 2, 3, 4, start of song. Regarding routing, this will largely depend on your interface and what you're using. Also, if you're not using these reverb and delay returns, get rid of them. I personally use a Scarlett 18920, but this can be done if you have just a 2-in, 2-out interface. The less outputs you have, the more you have to combine all of your audio signals into one. If you have 2 outputs, one of those is going to be all your tracks and all of your like live performance stuff, and the other one is going to be your headphone mix. Unfortunately, that means your signal will be mono. It's really good to have at least 4 outputs if you can, because then you can have like laptop left and right, one for your vocals, including any vocal chains that you have on your live vocals or any instrument. They can go to the mixing desk and be separate. The sound tech can turn up your vocals if they're too quiet compared to the tracks and so on. And then the 4th one for your click track, your headphone mix. If you only have 2 outputs, you can still do this. You just have to select 1 mono, 2 mono. Firstly, let's say you have 4 outputs. Our live tracks here, they're going to go to 1 and 2, already selected. Then you want to make a return track and label this, I'm going to say HP mix for headphone mix. Your click, rather than routing to the main audio, you're going to go sends only, and you're going to crank this. This audio is going to this return track and nothing else, meaning it won't go to the front of house. If you want, as you probably do, a blend of your tracks and your click, you control that here via the send. So let's say we want click really loud, sends about there. This audio again goes to external. If you only have 2 outputs, then you would select 1 here and 2 here. If you have 4 outputs, keep these stereo, 1 and 2, put this maybe on 4. Okay, now when we hear play, you see that the click is blue, meaning it's only going to sends. So if you plugged your headphones in to, in this case, output 4 of your interface, you would hear this much click and this much track, which is what we want. Next, we want to make a track for our, I'm going to call it our like live performance track. In my case, in King How, I use this for my violin and my vocals, each on a separate one. Make it for whatever you plan to perform live. I'm going to do vocals for this example. Create audio track. I actually don't know why it's always a snare. I don't know if that's a me thing or if that's an Ableton thing, but I'm just making this normal. I'm going to call this vocals. Toggling back to session view, which is hitting the tab key on your computer. For your vocal or your performance track, whatever instrument that may be, you need to turn monitoring to in. If you leave this in off, even if you're singing, you will not get any metering. If you have it on auto, you will only get metering if recording is enabled. If you have it on in, no matter what, you will get metering here. And that is what we want for the live instrument. That means that the signal is going straight through and will be going straight to the mixing desk of whatever venue you're playing at. This vocal track, we want to have, again, external selected, and then we want audio in from whichever input on your interface you're physically plugging your mic lead into. If you're plugging into 1, select 1. If you're plugging into input 4, select that. If you have more inputs and you're plugging into 8, select that. In this case, we'll make it 1. Where you route your audio to can be different. This doesn't have to go to output 1. So again, by default, audio is always just going to route to the main, but because we're doing this for live performance, we're splitting everything up. So again, select external out. We've got our laptop going to 1 and 2. We have our click track going to 4. So the only output left on our imaginary 4 output interface is 3. Now we've got tracks coming out of 1 and 2, vocals coming out of 3. And this, if you're new to live performance, you should write this down, because when you get to a gig and you've got your interface, ideally you should have your interface like rack mounted with XLRs already set up and ready to go to make it as easy as possible for the sound tech. And when you get there, you're going to get asked by the sound tech, what do you have? Do you have an aux cable for your laptop? What do you have to give me? And you need to say, okay, 1 and 2 are laptop, left and right, and 3 is vocals. If they say, oh great, got a mic already set up for you, then you say, I'm actually using my own mic if you are, or you can use theirs, and I'm running it through the rack or through the interface, and I will give you its output. And then the sound tech will normally take, in this case, three outputs, 3 XLR outputs, and plug them into a snake, which goes to the desk, etc. And that means that the sound tech will have control over the volume of your live tracks and the volume of your vocals. In King How, I also have violin, so I always say laptop 1 and 2, violin 3, and vocals 4. And if you're new to this, write these down, because you don't want to be there at the gig, sound checking, super rushed. You're always going to have some sort of laptop issues, so you might already be stressed because you've had to restart your laptop on the stage, and you don't then want to be asked by the sound tech, okay, can we get some vocal signal? And you're singing and nothing's coming out because you've accidentally told the sound tech that your vocals should be coming out of 1 and 2 when it's meant to be 3. So just write these down, be super on top of that, because the more prepared you are for gigs when it involves a laptop, the happier everyone will be. If you did only have a 2 output interface, it is a bit unideal because it means that it gives the sound tech no control of your vocals in relation to the live tracks. If your vocals are way too hot, you manually in Ableton have to turn them down here. It's doable. I did that my first year of performing with Ableton, but it's a bit unideal. Something that is missing here is we don't have any of our vocals going to our headphone mix. So pick how much you want. You could have a little bit of vocals, you could have heaps. whatever you need. Back to session view. Something I really strongly recommend doing is labeling your MIDI track with the song title. So we're going to call this Be There. Maybe even jot down the BPM and the key. Now we've only got one song in our set list. So what we're going to do is add another song over here. So I'll insert my blank MIDI track. And this one is going to be I put her in the corner. Now before you repeat the method we did before of grouping all of your tracks and then importing them into the main set list, the thing you have to do is automate the tempo of this. Every time you have a new song, tempo has to be automated. If you do this before importing the stems, it'll just save you a bit of double handling. So how we do that is we go down to our main track here. It's easier if you make it really big. You turn on automation, make sure that mix is selected, and then song tempo. We need to set this for the first song as well. So 138, it matches. And then at the end of the song, add another little dot thing and drag this out. Now it means that this whole song is 138 BPM. Now whatever your next song is in the set list, let's say this one is, 60 BPM. We're going to automate it and drag it down to 60, way at the bottom here. If you have a song, say at 40 BPM, super slow, and you're like, it stops at 60, you need to adjust your range here. So change this 60 down to 40. Now we would save this, close it, open up our other song from this folder here. I put her in the corner, live capitals. We would do the exact same procedure and then we import the stems in. And you do this over and over and over again until you have your whole live set mapped out. It's also really useful to add locators. There's a bunch of really cool Macs for Live devices out there by this guy called Ableton Drummer, and I use a lot of his devices in my live set. One of which is stop and go device, where it hits a bit of MIDI information and playback will stop and then it'll jump to the next locator in your set. So this is one way of organizing your set list. There are other tools like, I think it's called Ableton Set. I've never used it, but I'm interested in it, in which you can really easily jump to various points throughout your set. But this today is just the bare basics to help you kind of get set up. After you do this, there are so many rabbit holes that you can go down. You can also, on your live performance vocal track, you can add your vocal chain. You could add a vocoder, whatever you want to use live, you can add here. I use a bunch of vocoders in my live set and in my recorded stuff, and they're all linked to my vocal chain. I also have a bit of reverb on my vocals, which I process within Ableton, and then I just tell the sound tech to just keep everything dry from their end so that it's not reverb on reverb on reverb. I think that's everything, all the basics anyways. There is so much more you can do with this, but this is a good foundation to get you started.